As spring semester approaches, so does the ASA Book Club. Hello, everyone. My name is Haddy, and I'm joined today with Portia to discuss the fall semester book of the semester, Scholastique Mukasonga's Our Lady of the Nile. Our Lady of the Nile is a novel by the Rwandan author that gives us an insight on Rwandan elite's daughters at a prestigious Belgian Catholic school, training them to become the quote-unquote next female elite of Rwanda. Set 15 years before the start of the Rwandan genocide, Mukasonga is able to make racial and ethnic tensions and relations shine through in this bubble, guiding us towards what we know now to be one of history's worst events. With this, Portia and I will take you through the themes and moments that impacted us the most and are most relevant still to this day. Hello, Portia. Welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this podcast and to reading this book. I actually Rwandan myself, and she has quite a deep, I was going to say bookography, but I think it's called something else. I'm thinking of discography. Yeah. Yeah, like there's a word, we know it. We're masters and PhD students. So yeah, the story is this really powerful allegory and like exposition of how ethnic tensions exist and grow. And there's very few main characters, most of them young women. There's Virginia, and she's a Tutsi student who faces discrimination, and you kind of witness her become increasingly aware. And also, I think, express latent understanding from being a young person in Rwanda of the dangerous political climate. There's Gloriosa, who I think you might agree is like the villain of the story. Yes. She's a Hutu student. She's from an influential family, and she's very explicitly anti-Tutsi in her energy.
Chapter 1.
Page 1, chapter 1. The other student is Veronica. She's also Tutsi, and she similarly faces discrimination. And she seems quite still attached and dedicated to what she believes to be Rwandan, I think, outside of the colonial gaze and the internecine, tensions. And then you have the folks who run the school, the lycée, called Our Lady of the Nile. Lycée is, I guess, high school in French. And so you have Mother Superior, and she's quite concerned about just like decorum and properness and making sure these like young elite women are representing what they're doing there. And so she tries to maintain order, navigate political pressure, but she essentially, to me, I found her to just want to do right by her doctrine. And then you have Father Hermenegild, I think that's how you'd say his name. And he's quite a character, to say the least. He's obviously the school chaplain, and he is really sycophantic in his, I guess, like he praises the government overly too much. He's also low-key an abuser of these girls. And that's not great. But the point is, there's lots. I found the layering of this book, the role of education and power, the weaving in of mythology and like actual history, obviously gender, and like we would call it as, fancy higher education students, like feminist lens or critique or something like this. Yes, identity and belonging, I think, would be the last big theme.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for taking us through all of those. So I'll start us off with colonialism and religion as two of the bigger themes in our first part. So when it comes to colonialism, as I mentioned previously, the school is run by Belgian Catholics that essentially come over to train these women and take them away from Rwandan culture and Rwandan education that they deem to be essentially not good enough for the future of the country. And the school is perceived to be a place where one can get democratic Christian education, free from injustices of a feudal system, as quoted by the author. And so, although the first chapter is very descriptive and paints a picture of the setting and the contents the book happens in, the mentions of Christianity and early demonization of traditional religious practices are very clear. So most teachers are white, Belgian, or French, and there's military present. And there are also mentions of colonialism and colonial currency and how it is propped up. We get foresight into the genocide, as well as what the current climate is through colonialism. One thing that stood out to me, particularly when it comes to colonialism, is although it's seen as a place of prestige, the school is taking the women out of their traditional ways. And one way that this stood out to me was the shift from community to individualism regarding their sleeping arrangements in the very beginning, where the ladies kind of, you can sense that they want to sleep together as young women, but they're told that no, you can't sleep together. You have to sleep on your own beds. And this is the way that it's done. And it is also mentioned that French is the only language that is spoken on the premises of the school, and Swahili is demonized and seen as an Islamic language. So pointing straight towards the colonialism and the religious aspects of these. And then to build on that, as expected, there's only 2 Rwandan staff. I don't know if you remember what they do exactly.
I remember that they are in a more, one of them is the Kinyarwanda teacher. And I believe the other one was also in kind of a more subservient position as well. Like no Rwandan staff was above. Father Himanagild had his man thing going on, I guess. So there was a way he seemed on par-ish with Mother Superior, or had a type of authority that was respected. Yeah. But I believe the other Rwandan staff, like, was she the one who monitored the hut?
I think
the period hut, which we'll get to. Yes. Or at least that was one of her duties.
Right. Yeah. And then I remember a quote that came up in chapter 3 where one of the teachers said, Africa has no history because Africans could neither read nor write before the missionaries opened the schools. And so, first of all, Africa has no history is a big statement. And just generalizing it as Africa, period, when they are set in Rwanda, says a lot for me in the context of colonialism. So Africa as a geography in general has no valuable history for them to teach these ladies, even though this is where they are.
Yeah, and I actually believe that the other Rwandan stuff, she may have been the geography teacher. And it's interesting that you were speaking about the juxtaposition between the individualism of colonialism and the sort of more communal living. Like in that bed situation, the girls were like, how do you even make friends? How do you even share your stories from the day if you're not in the same bed chit-chatting away at the end of the night? And they're used to sleeping like 6 deep in their homes. And for the teacher, she juxtaposes history and geography. So Africa is relegated to geography. All you have to know is these places, where they are, who they belong to, still from this very colonial gaze. But it's the colonists who have history. They're the ones who came here and categorized things and told us who we are and like have done anything. And it was interesting coming through her mouth. Yes, and then the second theme that we thought would be good to highlight was this class and the status. And, to use a ubiquitous term now, the intersectionality of it all, because of course you have the obvious hierarchy, which is, between the whites, as they keep calling them, which was quite amusing to me. I don't know why. Yes, there's the racial hierarchy that exists, but even amongst the students in themselves, they don't necessarily see them as superior. They keep on insulting them underneath, but understanding how the world works. I remember one line that stood out to me was something like, whites who are devoid of the knowledge of politeness or something like this, who don't understand things. Honestly, one of my favorite sections is the one on gorillas as well, where one of the students, she's very attached to gorillas being Rwandan. She's kind of like, why do they act like Rwanda is just gorillas and we have to protect them and they have to go? She's like, as if they're not Rwandan and we don't know them. My tribe, they're our neighbors. The Pygmy tribe, the Batwa, she's like, why do they act like they're the ones who know how to approach them? And she's obsessed with like, I have to go visit them because I don't want them to be relegated to the only white people. But within the school, back to class and status, you can see the status between Hutu and Tutsi. At this moment, Hutu is feeling superior. Like we said, Gloriosa feels very free to just directly insult Tutsi students and complain that 2 of them per year is already too many and they need to be eliminated. Things like this that are very quite jarring when you read them.
She speaks of them very violently.
Very
also.
violently. Their death is kind of LOL,
Yeah.
I
have this quote, sorry to interrupt you, but in the first chapter, she says, a dash of ink, a slash of machete, and that's all it takes, and no more Tutsi. That Gloriosa says. So, and it's she's saying this laughing.
Yeah.
In front of the other Tutsi students.
And with the foreshadowing, there's a moment where Veronica is like, she'll never forget her laugh, in that moment. And it, foreshadowing what happens in the future, like especially later. And then you can clearly see wealth is part of the equation of doing that, of, delegating your class and your status, quite obviously. And then there's references to what it protects you from and what it doesn't protect you from, and you see that that's what people are supposed to be aiming to have. The girls, some of them like have these boyfriends who might be lower class status. They don't want to tell anybody about this. You also see it in how closely affiliated you are to Christian religiosity, and when you reference prior mythos or your own beliefs or ancestral anything, it's very like hush hush, and you can see how there's this reference to these concepts of detootsifying oneself or dehutifying oneself, and the denigration detootsifying oneself brings you, but in the prior days, how a Hutu might want to dehutify themselves. And in fact, one of the students at the school, Modesta, she's half Hutu, half Tutsi. There's this knowledge that she has Hutu ancestry, which is why she maintains a friendship with like Gloriosa, because Gloriosa is always holding this over her. Like, I know you're a little bit dirty, let's say. But then she's also friends with Veronica, and Veronica completely understands her need to have allegiance with Modesta, even though Gloriosa ruins her life daily. Because to maintain your status is the most important. And another thing that's kind of a bottom layer, but is kind of a vehicle, an overarching vehicle. And I know this, like Rwandan culture, like as in most African cultures, like family is everything. Do you bring shame to the family or do you not? I mean, I just think Mukasonga does such a brilliant job of weaving in all these different layers in a way that is so natural, in that way that it's invisible. You don't meet someone, say hello, and be like, I consider you high status. You can. Also, she's very funny. The book is quite funny. There's lots of lines. He also wants to like I said, with his sycophantic character, like he's telling some tall tales, like I made these contributions and everyone's suspicious, but you have to respect his position, So for sure, the overarching themes of like assimilating into the hierarchy and the importance of purity in cementing your status, or kind of just projecting purity, just always playing that game in the hierarchy of class and status is a very present theme in multiple areas in this book.
And even when it comes to purity and like boyfriends, relationships and stuff, I feel like even though they know that purity is a big thing and they have to keep this certain image, they do show up with their boyfriends at school on the first day. They get dropped off. And I think it was one character, but I forget the name. But she shows up on the back of her boyfriend's bicycle or something like that. And all the girls are like, wow, she has a boyfriend. But kind of shaming her, but also you can sense their envy somehow. Yeah,
it's very interesting. I mean, I guess as we transition to the second theme as well, which is like the big one, girlhood, womanhood, adolescence. There's still young women at the end of the day who are going to have very common natural like urges and desires and curiosities, which is so interesting, because isn't that what always disrupts these systems of oppression, is just being human? It's always going to interrupt the thing, because it will. Like, there's nothing natural about these arbitrary categories. And so you have all these young women, all these hormonal young women in this like extremely tense and kind of complex political situation in this like supposed to be tightly controlled environment. Kumurongo, as we would say it in Kinyarwanda, like meaning in the line.
In the line. Yeah. And so maybe to go into womanhood and like how this is portrayed in the book. I guess for anybody, I didn't go to all girls school, but I guess for anybody that went to all girls school, they would understand this as a thing that is just normal. But even for us that didn't go to all girls schools, having a community of girlfriends, and there's certain things you talk about, certain things you do, and not a competition, but in this book particularly, they talk about when they start developing breasts. So they speak of a group with breasts and those without breasts. So having breasts meant that you can do things that other girls couldn't. So it's also tied back into the status thing. It's seen as a status symbol of, oh, I have breasts, so I can do certain things that you can't do. You sit back there and wait until you have what I have so that you can do what I can do.
Yeah, so I actually did go to an all-girls school.
Perfect.
This book is about me, but maybe 3 decades earlier. But I went to an all-girls boarding school in South Africa, but same kind of an Anglican school, religious energy. And it's true, the adolescent years are kind of crazy. And it's funny how things change, but things stay the same. Because as you're talking about the breast, it's simultaneously this thing that you have to covet because it gets you to womanhood, but then you're also constantly reminded about the tax of womanhood. There's, I think, an overarching theme is shame.
Yes.
That is what
women
girlhood exactly is peppered by. And I kept thinking about how it really fascinated me how just how oppressed I'm going to say women are. Make a crazy statement right now. To the point that you can we literally bleed every month, but the society is such that you can never hear about that until it happens to you. But this another part, this impurity, this dirtiness that it has. Back to the weaving in of mythology, she implies that people think they're cursed. Like many young girls think they're cursed with this. They don't know what's going on because it's not told to them biologically. And I don't think much has changed. And back in the 70s, they're you need to get these strips of cloths. Basically, they make their own pads that they keep, and then they wash them and hang them up. Exactly. When there's this room where they wash their pads and they hang them up, and the pads never quite get clean. And the woman who watches the hut there's this very intense, profound, beautiful, ugly statement where she is basically saying you can wash and wash it out, but you can never get the stain out of what it is to become a woman. So she says, at the back, there's a tub for you to wash your dirty pads. You'll scrub and you'll scrub, but you'll never scrub hard enough to erase the sin of being a woman. And believe me, I could tell you the owner of each and every pad, those who scrub and those who don't. You can spot the lazy ones immediately. Their pads remain steeped in their menstrual secretions. Shame on them. So make sure you scrub, Modesta, to avoid piling shame upon shame. And yeah, I just thought that she does such a good job of really, very honestly exposing these truths, but also keeping the innocence of the girls, keeping that sense of what is happening? Why is it like this? That you can ask that throughout.
Okay, so to go back a little bit to the context of the book, so as we mentioned previously, it's set about 15 years before the start of the Rwandan genocide. But towards the end of the book, Golorisa, one of the students that is, outwardly and very loudly anti-Tutsi, says that she's going to go and attempt to reshape the Lady of the Nile's nose. So the Lady of the Nile is essentially a statue of a Virgin Mary, but she has black skin. Mm-hmm. So she goes and says that she's going to reshape the nose because the nose is too Tutsi, and what she's doing is a act of heroism and a political message. And she's doing good. She's not doing anything wrong, and she'll be celebrated and praised for what she's doing here. And so after the many, I guess, violent and crazy things that she has said throughout the book, this stands out as her, to me, her last, I guess, not stab, but this is what I'm doing. You can't do anything about it. One, because of my status, and two, because most people here are behind me. They believe what I also believe.
Yes, and I think even taking the specific group out of it, right? I think it's like following Gloriosa's journey. I mean, she starts out hostile. That's what she's symbolizing in this hatred, right? And she it escalates. It's words. It's just words. It's just words. And I thought that it was quite skillful of Mukasonga to make sure that something material happened, something physical happened. If you've read about the genocide or particularly the process leading up to genocide, you know that the radio was very popular and there was a lot of hate speech basically going out. There's in the book as well, she refers to the other names that Tutsis are known by. The famous one is cockroaches, right? So this rhetorical dehumanization always will end up in actual material dehumanization. And I thought that Gloriosa's character was so illustrative of that in a great way, because she's obviously a young woman that's not, it's just simply like a precursor because we know what's coming. And yeah, the casual nature and the permissiveness within the society, right, to be able to dehumanize folks rhetorically is very dangerous.
You can feel that throughout the book, and I think it's an interesting book because obviously you read about the genocide, you watch things that portray what happened and speak about what happened, but seeing this from a perspective of young women that obviously were present, but you don't get that perspective a lot. And in the context of a school where things essentially play out how they would in real life, with people being how they are with each other, you can see how, I don't know, just in different contexts, these things happen and I guess blow up in the end of the day.
But yeah, I think it's an excellent book, and it's really demonstrates how genocide is not like a sudden occurrence. It's like very gradual. You have discrimination, propaganda, and like I said, this normalization of hatred, and using young women to offer that perspective on conflict and war. I think is great, because then you also insert this other hierarchy. So I really enjoyed the book, and I think others will too.
Yeah, no, agree. I really enjoyed the read as well, and thank you so much for joining me and offering your valuable perspectives. And to everybody listening, also thank you so much for joining us and sticking with us till the end. And if you're interested in reading African literature or learning more about African literature, you can join the ASA Book Club. It's starting at the start of the first day of the semester on the 17th. And you can visit our Instagram page at ASA_IHEID for more information. So yeah, thank you so much and have a good day, good night, whenever you're listening from.
Bye.